so we're going to continue doing the derivations in your chart. So the next one, just before we started the recording, we were talking about pets anyway, and I wasn't sure where we were when I was thinking about it this morning, but I was thinking about sixth house. And one of the things the sixth house does rule is pets. It rules health and service and servants. So all of those can be derivated by looking at the chart. And one of the things I also want to mention to you is that any part of your life or in a particular person or being in your life is going to be represented by a particular house. And you can take that house and turn your chart around and make that house the first house, and it will represent that individual or that being. So sixth house is going to be your pet. If you wanted to look at what's going on with pets or a pet in your life. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting, although maybe it's kind of challenging, is that because right now Saturn is transiting your fifth house, the fifth house is the house directly behind the sixth house. Now, the 12th house is the house directly behind the first house. So your sixth house ruling your pet, the fifth house is going to be your pet's 12th house. So Saturn transiting your 12th house, your fifth house, is also at times going to give you, in terms of if you have any animals or an important pet, but that pet is going through Saturn in the 12th house. And when humans go through Saturn in the 12th house, they can often have serious health issues. But a lot of the time, they're not meant to be, they don't tend to be fatal. They tend to be difficult and intense. So, but sometimes it's just losses, the 12th house endings. So it could be an ending with a pet, but it could also mean that the pet's going through a health crisis and gets through it. Because we were talking about your cat before we started.
Yeah, my cat's not doing very well, so.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so do you remember what to do as far as, because that's, when we derivate a house that has no planets in it, the derivations become, in a way, more important. You get more information. Because if we look at this sixth house, well, it's just a blank, empty sixth house, ruled by Aquarius. Okay, so, but if we start looking at the planet that rules the house, we can often get more information.
The planet that rules the house.
So what planet rules your sixth house?
Is it Aquarius?
Aquarius is the sign, yep. And what planet rules Aquarius?
I think it is, I gotta remember all these now. Saturn?
That's right.
Okay,
so where is your Saturn?
Where is my Saturn? Where is my Saturn? The second house there?
Yep, that's right, in Libra.
Okay, so Saturn is in Libra. Sixth house. So explain to me how to do this one more time.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated because you're going to try to
write different things to remember. Like I'm good at all the symbols for the most part, but actually
that's right.
Together.
And sometimes it can be trying to derivate things can end up getting a little obscure to get meaning that relates specifically to a given situation. But if we want some information about your sixth house, we know that it's going to your second house, the ruler. So second house is my earthly needs, love and affection. So we can certainly see that pets are going to stabilize you because the second house stabilizes things. The second house is a house of love and affection. And it's certainly, because of Saturn and Libra, the fear of relationships failing, your pets can be extremely comforting in terms of your fear of relationships failing. You also would be very responsible as a pet owner because Saturn is a responsible planet. So that, that's another thing that indicates, along with Virgo rising, a lot of Virgo rising people can be more inclined towards pets and animals, and a lot of people with Sun in Sagittarius like animals. So, and Saturn's a pretty important planet in our chart.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just explain to you how I thought you just did that. So we were looking at the sixth house.
Mm-hmm.
The ruler is Aquarius. I know that the planet that rules Aquarius is Saturn. So then I found Saturn in the second house.
Yeah.
Okay, I just need to repeat that back to you. Okay.
Yes, perfect. Now another thing, second house rules money. So it does give an indication that you might tend to spend money on your pets or money on your health.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah, lose a lot of money on pets.
Yes. Now the ruler of my second house is in my sixth house. It's a very similar kind of thing, and it links the two houses.
Yeah.
I definitely will spend money on my health, like poof, very easily. And that right now I don't have any pets, but because I have 5 planets in my sixth house, I've had an awful lot of pets in my life. So certainly there's been expenditure around having all those animals.
You ever look at a chart and see like an influx of money coming in for someone in that degree too? Or no?
In what does last time you said, in what degree?
In abundance, or like, can you ever predict like someone who like wins the lottery, like, and they're winning like $2 million? Can you ever like see that in someone's chart? Not that I'm saying I'm going to win the lottery, but when we're talking about
I understand. Actually, it'd be interesting to actually look at. Well, there's 2 ways to look at that question. Is it something that shows up in a birth chart, or is it something that shows up in a transit?
What do you mean by a transit? Like through the chart?
Transit, that's what you talked about when you said I'm in my 5th house right now, which means that Saturn is transiting your 5th house. So transit just means moving through.
Right.
So as the planets are in the sky, they're going through certain signs, and that wherever they are in that sign, we just put that into your chart, and that's where that planet is transiting. And so sometimes you could see through a transit that somebody's definitely in a phase of real abundance in some way, or they certainly have the opportunity to be very abundant. But yeah, it would be interesting to try and look at see if we can find some charts of lottery winners and look at the chart just to see if it comes up in the chart in general. Now there is a woman, I can't remember her name at the moment, but she's very famous as a winner of everything. And she's a lot older now. She lives in a state that doesn't have lotteries. She's never entered the lottery because she can't where she lives. But since the 1950s, she just decides that she's going to win a contest, and she enters the contest and she wins it. So she's won trips, she's won cash, she's won houses, she wins things for her kids. She just constantly wins because she's decided she's going to do it.
Like manifesting, or that intuitively, like from her chart, that she like.
Well, in her chart, she has got a Jupiter-Sun aspect, and Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Jupiter is the planet of abundance and prosperity and faith and grace and surrendering to grace, and the Sun is the self. So you can see that it's easier for her, if she decides to do it, to lead a charmed existence. Now, not everybody has a Sun-Jupiter conjunction can do that. Now, my younger son has a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, and when he was 2, we were shopping in a grocery store, and he pointed to this green racing car. It was a little, like a green pedal car you could ride in. He said, "Mom, will you buy that for me?" And I said, "Well, I can't buy it because it's a prize in a contest, so we have to win it." And so I told him, "We'll just enter once. We're going to put your name on a piece of paper. We're going to enter once. And you're going to go home, and you're going to imagine that the phone rings and the guy says you won the racing car, and you're going to imagine yourself in the racing car, pedaling yourself down the road, and we're just going to win the racing car." And I knew, because of how young he was, and how when at that age a parent is God to a child, that if I told him we're going to win the racing car, he would absolutely believe it, and he would follow the directions. So sure enough, the guy phoned. He and his dad went to the grocery store, picked up his green racing car, and he pedaled it down the road.
Cool.
But he kept it, and I told him to keep it because it was the lesson of how we can all manifest things. But it's Jupiter's Sun. Jupiter's in Cancer, which means the real gifts you get are in your childhood. So that was one of the gifts of his early childhood, which is related to Sun Jupiter and this capacity to manifest things. So I don't know if a lottery, for quote unquote exactly a lottery, would show up in a person's chart, but tendency to have abundance, tendency to have luck, tendency, which is really trust in life. The word
Yeah.
luck comes from Latin lux, which means life or the life force. It means being alive, being trust in life, trust in that living divine energy. That's really what luck is. Now, a person having an innate capacity for that would show up in the chart. A person having some stress around that would also show up in the chart. But then the importance of it thing as well is the chart just shows us where we started out and what our intentions are and what our issues are. But then we work with it. This is why we don't have to be bound by any.
We're not passive people in this. Yeah.
But it gives us clarity, because if you think, oh, I don't have any issues around this, but why am I having problems all the time? Then you can look in the chart and you can dig around and you can see, okay, here's the issues you started out with, here's where they come from, and it helps to unravel them that way.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other final thing about the ruler of your sixth house being Saturn in Libra is, I don't know if you remember when we were first looking at the rulers of the signs, I also talked about that when a planet is exalted in a sign, which brings the highest out of the planet, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. So that's another reason for loving animals, because the ruler is so strong, and so it draws your attention more. So you would think, looking at this empty sixth house, well, she probably isn't interested in pets, but but sixth house isn't only pets. We just focused on that. Sixth house has to do, again, with health and healing, and it has to do with a day-to-day work environment. Whereas the 10th house is our career. So there's a lot of houses that have similar meanings, but they have a different shading to that meaning. So sixth house is I go to my job. 10th house is I fulfill my career. There's a different status to sixth house and 10th house, although they both have to do with work. Just like third house and 11th house are both friendship houses, but the third house is the buddies that I grew up around, that I can hang out with and totally be myself with. 11th house are my friends that share my dreams and my common goals, that they're the people I really want to be with, they're the people I want to learn from. And, my sense that a lot of these houses that rule similar things, to me, the ideal component of any of these areas is a blend of them all. So for friendship, to me, the ideal friendship is a friendship based on ideals, along with someone you can just hang around with and be totally yourself. Also, our career should be our status and we should get recognition, but it should also be our service. Life.
Is it the fact that it kind of starts with, developing the buddies, and then you move through the signs and you're developing people, your community, the people that you're probably are kind of best suited? Is that the idea behind that? Of course, buddies are great. And then you work towards kind of an extension of that.
Yes. Oh, definitely. And the third house is an earlier house. So we do develop the third house before we develop the 11th house. Yeah. Likewise, we develop the sixth house, our job and our sense of service, before we get to the 10th house, where we have our real career and our real role. So definitely. And fifth house is lovers, and seventh house is the mate. So we're going to have our lovers and our dating and our recreational kinds of relationships before we make serious commitments. But some people say that, well, the seventh house responsible commitment is the end game. But to me, once again, I think we should still be lovers and playful and free with our partner. We should be having a fifth house and seventh house type of relationship, ideally.
But that doesn't mean you're not going to find your partner in the fifth house. It just means that you're like, there's still that commitment in the seventh, right? You know why I'm asking you that.
I do. Yes.
Like, what does that mean? I'm going to have to wait to the seventh house. Like, how old am I going to be when I'm in my seventh house? That's like,
right. Yes.
You'll be 80 when you commit, maybe.
Yeah. It is honestly less common to find your partner with Saturn's transiting your fifth house, because it's more about that inner relationship with yourself. But everybody has their own rhythm to things. And it's very easy to find your partner in the sixth. Because sixth is preparation for marriage. And if you've already been doing lots of preparation for marriage, and plus we have your again, the ruler of both of these houses is that Saturn in Libra. So you're
Mm-hmm.
certainly doing a more serious transit of your fifth house than other people would, because we're already focused on your Saturn in Libra. So we're already looking at a partnership-oriented experience rather than just a purely recreational experience. Your whole fifth house says that, really, because
Yeah.
it's Saturn is serious and Venus is in Capricorn. It says, well, serious relationship. You're not really there for just the casual experience. It's just not a part of your wiring.
How can someone tell again how long they're going to be in a house? Because I just moved into my fifth house.
Yeah, well, Saturn's transit of a house takes about 2.5 years, and with retrograding, it tends to be about 3 years. And you've been in the house for a little while, because right now, as we're talking, it's May 2019, and you have 5 degrees Capricorn on your fifth house. So you've been in it. Yeah, you've been in it since. Yeah, it was pretty recently moved in, actually.
I thought it was November, but maybe.
Yeah, it was November 2018. Mm-hmm.
So another year and a bit, 2 years maybe.
Yeah, it's probably about 2 years.
And can I ask another really just basic question that I think everyone will think of too? Do we actually make it through all the houses in a lifetime?
With Saturn, we do. With Saturn has a 29.5-year cycle.
Yeah.
So we tend to go around several times. Now, that what's also interesting is once you get to about your mid-30s, you've got, and especially by the time you get to your 40s, you have, when you have Saturn transiting a particular house, it's a house you've been through before. So you have to think about, well, where was I? What was going on in my life 29 or 30 years ago? Because it's going to be a similar cycle. Jupiter transits the entire houses, all of the entire zodiac, in about 12 years. So we do Jupiter, we go around many times. Uranus, I have a friend who's in his Uranus return right now. He's 84. Uranus takes 84 years to go around the chart. So Uranus almost times a lifetime in a way, because, I mean, people can certainly live longer than your Uranus return, and I certainly hope my friend will, because I really enjoy him.
Yeah. What was Saturn again? How many times?
Saturn is 29.5 years.
29.
So Saturn, he's in his Uranus return and his third Saturn return. They coincide. Which is also fascinating. Because by the time we get Uranus, as it transits the chart, Uranus is the awakener. It wakes you up. It frees you, and it makes you see the truth like you never have before in terms of where it is in your chart. So by the time you get to be 84 years old, you're fully awake. There's no more illusions. So it's pretty interesting.
Okay, so Jupiter's 12 years, Uranus is 84 years, and Saturn's 29.5 years.
That's right. Now, Pluto, you won't do a full transit in a given lifetime unless you become immortal. Because I think Pluto's transit is approximately 264 years, something like that. So it's a long time to go through the entire zodiac.
Okay.
And Neptune also will take a pretty long time, not quite as long as Pluto. And the sun goes through all of your houses once a year. And this is why we have there's certain times of year where the same kind of stuff keeps happening, always at that time of year. Or we're in a certain mood very often, always at that time of year. And it's because the sun is transiting through that part of our chart.
That's interesting. So how would I know? Oh, I guess I just have to look back, right? My sun.
Yeah. Well, the sun is always where your sun is when you're born, on your birthday. And it's good to start looking at ephemerai, which is the tables that show where all the planets are, and try to look at them a lot, so you get used to looking at all the signs and symbols for the planets, and you can look up where is the sun right now, and look at what time of year does the sun tend to go through the particular part of your chart. Right now, because we're in May, the sun is transiting your 9th house.
How do you spell ephemerai? What is that? Ephemerai?
Yeah, an ephemeris is the singular term. So an ephemeris is a book or a a program
Mhm.
or a page, say on Astrology, there are pages where you can look up ephemeris information. And those are the tools that list where the planets are right now.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So, no.
Okay. Sorry, went off track there, but there's
That's
just some
okay.
things that we're talking about, going house to house. I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. So then if we go to the 7th house, we're going to, now it's too bad I can't just turn the screen. If I could turn the screen around 180 degrees, we could look at what your unconscious archetype of a partner is. Now, if I took your birth time and changed it by about 12 hours, it would almost do that. So let's just play with that. It's not going to be exactly right, but it'll give you at least a visual look at kind of what your 11th house, what your 7th house looks like if you turn it into the 1st house. See, now that's not exactly right, because it gave it Aquarius. So it's not, because the way the houses line up, and even the way some of the signs rise very quickly, and some of them rise much more slowly.
Would it be Aquarius? It would be Capricorn, wouldn't it? Or no?
It would be, well, your 7th house cusp is Pisces, so we want a Pisces rising. That's still Aquarius. Let's try. Okay.
And you're just doing that by shifting it 12 hours forward?
Yeah, but I needed to actually shift it about 14 hours forward. Actually, let me shift it 13 and a half. Okay, so this is pretty close to what your subconscious partner chart looks like. Not exactly right, because actually the sun should be in the 10th house, because you have sun in the 4th. But look how different this looks.
Yeah.
And our partner is our shadow, is the opposite to us, but that still exists within us. So this is pretty close to the same degree as your ascendant. It's not exactly right. If we imagine the sun is in the 10th house, so your partner is going to have a lot of stuff up in the public area of the chart, because the top half of the chart is public and the bottom half of the chart is private.
So does that mean they're going to be more in a public sphere?
Often, or they're going to be more connected to their career, their role in society. There's this drive to do things, do things that are visible.
It's kind of like mine, but it's at the top.
That's right, exactly. That's what I did. I tried to just flip it around.
Yeah, I see what you mean now.
Yeah. And if we had a paper version of your chart, all we'd need to do is turn the paper upside down.
So that's how someone would literally look to see what their subconscious partner chart is?
Exactly.
That's so cool.
It is. It really is. So look at your partner has all these things in the 8th house. And all these things in the 9th and 10th houses. And your Venus is naturally in the 5th house, which is down here. His Venus, the archetype of your partner is Venus in the 11th house. So it shifts a lot of things around, and you can actually then look at all the different houses of your partner and really go on an exploration of what is your animus look like. Because in Jungian psychology, the anima is the inner feminine of a man, which is in dreamscape, that every man has this woman inside of him that has her own personality, and it's his ideal image or his automatic subconscious image of woman and partner. And in a man is called the animus. You can see your animus by turning your chart upside down. It's best to kind of print it out and then turn it upside down, because you can't really do it. You can't really do it by changing the hours, because the house cusps wobble around too much. You don't get an exactly accurate opposite situation. So I'm just doing this to try and give you the visual.
Does that mean, like, because it's a subconscious, you're going to have this draw kind of from a soul perspective, right? Because it's in you, so like that person's going to be like that ideal person for you. You're going to spot them probably before you even spot them, right? Because it's already
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So let me go back to your regular birth time so we can derivate it correctly. Make sure that we have everything in the right houses.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Oh, there it is again.
Yeah. It's funny. It looks exactly the same, it's just upside down. Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the ruler of your 7th house?
That is Pisces.
Yeah, Pisces is the ruling sign. And what's the ruling planet?
Okay, so I think it's Jupiter.
That's right.
And Jupiter looks like, where is Jupiter? Okay, let me look at this a little closer. Jupiter is in my 3rd house.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Your lucky 4-leaf clover is in the 3rd house. Yep.
So do I look at, like, again, just learning how to do this, do I go to like my stuff about like the 3rd house, which is my friends, my siblings, my communication, my actions?
Yep. Yeah.
So what do I do again with this? So now
Yes.
I'm figuring out the thought, figuring out where it goes, and then you help me interpret it a bit more.
Yeah. And also the sign of Libra.
Mm-hmm. The sign of Libra, yeah. So do you look, like, I'd go to my sheets about Libra and the 3rd house? Is that how I would?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also Jupiter itself. Jupiter is grace and freedom and expansion and playfulness. And
isn't Jupiter the lucky one? Like, if a planet was to come in, that's when you would have it, kind of
yes.
thing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So Libra's still learning these, but fairly, cooperatively, justly, working as a team, beautifully and graciously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So what could we say about your partner, knowing all of this? What would your partner be like? What would your relationship be like?
Well, I always say, instead of relationship, I say partnership. So this really speaks to me as far as the cooperatively working as a team.
Exactly.
Beautiful, gracious, like the feeling that I have in me, and it's funny, it's like anyone would understand this, like being on like Tinder or Bumble, like you really want to make sure that you're really clear on kind of like, for people like me who are not looking for hookups or anything else, you want to be really clear of what you're looking for. So I always get weird responses when I say partnership, because a lot of people say relationship.
Yes.
And so mine is beyond relationship, you know.
Yes.
It doesn't have, like, not that relationships necessarily have restrictions on it, but partnership for me is like really just doing life together, supporting each other to be the best versions of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I look at Libra, that's kind of what stands out to me.
Absolutely. And Jupiter too it's expansion, it's grace.
Yeah.
It's very much about really having a partnership, but it's completely non-restrictive because Jupiter is so free. But to you, that is freeing. And you know, the Jupiter in Libra, Jupiter is where we're being given gifts and grace and divine assistance in this lifetime. So your partner would be, you would be given the gift at some point of a partner that has all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, all Virgo rising people have Jupiter ruling their 7th house. And I know for me, with Jupiter ruling my 7th house, I'm very drawn to the free spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that makes total sense for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else can we tell from it? I guess you'd look at Libra, Jupiter, 3rd house. Yeah. Communication. Yeah. Okay.
And really, certainly there's a sense of your partner's your best friend. Because it's that. Mm-hmm.
I always say my best friend that I love to have sex with, like that I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, and if you know my sign, you know why I would say it like that, right?
Exactly.
But, that's exactly me.
Here's my best friend. Now, what's the ruler of Jupiter? Jupiter's ruler is Venus. There's Venus-Mars trine. And Venus-Mars trine actually says, I love to have sex.
There you go. So that's like, it's interesting. And everyone who watches this is going to get to know me really well too, but it's interesting me learning about me, because I know this, but it's interesting to see that the chart speaks to that without me even knowing that before.
Exactly. Yeah,
so it's true. It really kind of sets like the integrity behind the chart, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, and like I was saying before, when we turn this upside down, you can look at your partner and all the different houses these planets are in, and just by flipping the house opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So your subconscious partner has Mars in the 7th house,
Mm-hmm.
and Saturn and Pluto in the 8th, and Jupiter, Mercury in the 9th, and the Moon, Uranus, Sun, and Neptune in the 10th house. So very strong 10th house focus. Venus in the 11th house, so it's always opposite. Chiron in the 3rd house. And that's just the north node, the moon's nodes, which we'll get to. But
so I have something in my chart that tells me basically that I have, if I go through all of my lessons, that I have, the confirmation of a soulmate there.
yes,
Would
that's right.
would that be the same as, like, because it's opposite? Would it be the same, or it would have to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be. Yes, your soulmate would definitely reflect what's in your subconscious about what your partner is.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But what's interesting is any unhealthy aspects that are in that unconscious template would need to be transmuted, and then you're able to fulfill things. So the one thing that sort of stands out to me as potentially being something that would, in your partners, that would need transmuting would be the Mars in the 7th, because Mars in the 7th is a tendency to be oppositional or be in conflict, be with a partner or about the whole concept of partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the piece that would need to be transmuted.
Kind of like an Aquarius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm learning more about the charts, I'm also learning kind of about their, some high level independent struggles too, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Your book's really great for that too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so if we go on to the 8th house.
So that's the Ram, that's Aries.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of different meanings of what the 8th house is about. So what part of the 8th house would you like to explore?
Well, it's interesting. It's my sexuality, my investments, my responsibilities, my attitudes towards death, my inheritance, my fertility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm interested in my fertility. I hope it's not in my 8th house, because that's like really old for me, but I'd be interested. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, remember, Jupiter will go there not too long from now.
Yeah.
And certainly when Saturn or Jupiter transits either the 5th house or the 8th house, our fertility is up.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that it's non-existent the rest of the time.
Yeah. What do you mean it's up? Because it's like, yeah, you're kind of.
Well, I have warned people, women below the age of menopause who are single, when Saturn's going through their 5th or 8th, or Jupiter's going through their 5th or 8th, you're more fertile now. So if you don't want children, do be more careful. And I've had people say, "Oh no, I'm fine, I won't get pregnant," and sure enough, they got pregnant.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. Good reminder. I'm in my 5th.
Yeah.
So the ruler is Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And Mars is in my 1st house.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Aries, right?
Yep, Aries rules Mars rules Aries, so Mars rules your 8th house. And it's in Virgo in the 1st.
It's in Virgo, yes. So you'd be looking at Virgo and Mars.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
I'll give you another kind of interesting piece of information, that a Mars-Chiron aspect, especially a positive aspect, you have a Mars-Chiron trine in a woman's chart, is an indication of high fertility. So it's interesting that this Mars even rules your 8th house.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
So it's purifying, helpfully, organizational, analytically, critically, sensually.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mars. Well, no, I'm going to go look at 1st house. My first house is myself, my sense of identity, my appearance, and how I begin things. So how do I interpret this? Help me again.
Yeah, it's another one that's a bit challenging to interpret.
Yeah, I'm able to get it. I'm able to get there now, which is awesome. I'm feeling good about it, but it's just the interpretation is going to take me some time for sure.
Yeah. And some of them will be so easy and automatic to figure out. Yeah. But there's two ways you can look at this, and they both apply. I'll give you the negative one first. The negative is, this is all up to me. I'm nervous. I'm concerned because Virgo can have anxiety.
Yes, for sure.
So that's the anxious side. The other positive side is, if it's in your first house, it means you have more control over it than you think you do. Mm-hmm. It means that you look after your body, because Virgo is health oriented. You be well organized and certainly very conscious, as long as you don't let yourself get too neurotic. Yeah. You can make sure you do it really, really well.
Yeah.
So, as Virgo's perfection, wholeness, health, sensuality, like you listed, that, you mentioned that as one of the key words. Mm-hmm. Mars itself is sexuality. So again, there's a lot of energy there.
Yeah.
As far as, being able to make something happen.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go play at the 9th.
So the 9th house is again Aries.
Mm-hmm.
So do I go right back to my first house again for it?
Yes, you do. Mm-hmm. And what part of the 9th house are we going to look at?
Let me see the 9th house. So it's my religion and philosophy, my travels, my higher education, my sense of significance. And then it's Taurus is in my 9th house, right?
Yeah, well, you do have a lot of Taurus in your 9th, but actually your 9th house cusp is 29 Aries. Mm-hmm. Most of it is Taurus. You've only got 12 minutes worth of Aries, but that is the actual cusp, is Aries. So the ruler is going to be Mars.
Okay. So in this house, I mean, for me, my sense of significance probably is always on my mind. So that's probably going to pop out for me again.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's Mars. And Mars is my aggressions, my sexual energy, how I pursue my goals, how I pursue my lovers, my actions, and my anger. Mm-hmm. So how do I interpret this?
Look at it as being in Virgo in the first house. Blend the three of them together. Mm-hmm. Because if you're looking for your sense of significance, you're going to do it in a very active way, Mars. Mm-hmm. You're going to do it in a very analytical way, and you're going to dive into yourself, first house. Mm-hmm. So there's a tremendous active drive to analyze and know yourself as the means to find your significance.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yep. But now see how interesting this gets, because we've looked at Mars as the ruler of two different houses. Yeah. And it shades a bit differently depending on what the house is.
Right.
Because these archetypes of, signs, planets, houses, they're very vast. An archetype is never limiting. It's always expansive. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important to really work with it long enough to really get a feel for these archetypes. And then you can get in there and after a little while, things will just pop really fast for mm-hmm. you. When you look at a chart, you'll start to just expand into each of these facets of it and see stuff really quick. It's really cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah.
I just need to get to the interpretation piece. I think of that. Do you find through the trainings that you've had that the interpretation piece takes the longest time, because you really have to kind of feel into it, right? It's going to take some time.
Okay. Yeah, it does. And
I'm a perfectionist, so for me,
yes.
I can look at kind of see what what the symbols are now, which was a big thing for me at first, obviously, but now I'm like, crap, I need to kind of, it's helpful if people practice with their own chart for sure, because that
It
helps
is.
a lot. But yeah, the interpretation is, I'm sure it takes time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does. And the
What are
more you play with your own chart and the more you play with charts of people close to you and just really get into the feeling of the experience of what this is like in your life, then the more you really get to know these things as they're like living forces, really. Every sign, every planet, every house, you get the feeling of what they're like.
Yeah. Okay.
And in the meantime, you come to know yourself in a much more profound way than you ever did before. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think that's important as a part of this work too, don't you think?
Yes.
Like, as a part of this, it's I think fundamentally I always know this, but then when you kind of learn more about your chart, it helps to kind of confirm it, and
Yep.
it's almost like a level of peace that you get from it. Just even like the more constructive pieces.
It's true. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's so valuable for understanding other people.
I agree. Yeah, because you have to know yourself before you can help others, right?
Yeah, it's true. And then if you use astrology correctly when you're analyzing other people's charts, you really get to unconditionally accept who they are and understand who they are and know, oh, wow, now I understand what's going on here.
Yeah, and their struggles too. I think we can be really judgmental of ourselves in like normal culture. So like this just presents an opportunity to really feel into kind of like what they would be experiencing and why they are, maybe doing the things they are doing or feeling the way they're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
So 10th house is again Taurus. But then you have, okay, so explain this to me again, because there's Pisces that's kind of in the middle there, but that doesn't matter, right?
Actually, that's a stylized Gemini.
Oh, it's a stylized Gemini. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Even when I looked at it, it looked like Pisces to me for a minute.
Kind of a little bit separate. Yeah. Okay.
Because normally Gemini should never be drawn that way. The lines should be straight across the top and the bottom.
Okay, so I have Taurus at the start of the 10th house, but I don't know that we've seen where the Geminis come in the middle like that. So what is that?
That's called an interception.
Okay.
And that is when you have the 10th house cusp is 27 Taurus. The 11th house cusp is 5, almost 6 Cancer. So the entire sign of Gemini is sitting in this house. It's got no house cusps moving through it. So the sign Gemini is intercepted in between Taurus and Cancer.
Okay.
Now this also means you've got the same thing down here in the 4th house.
Right.
A Sagittarius. You don't see that as easily because we're seeing so many planets in your 4th house, but it's really obvious when you look at the 10th house. What's that?
But what does it mean again? Like what?
Well, it's in traditional astrology. It's when you have signs that are intercepted, they don't have an outlet as easily. And when you have any planets in signs that are intercepted, they're said to not have a good outlet. What I've seen is that in some way in the early life, the person is not encouraged to express those parts of themselves. So we have your Uranus, Sun, and Neptune all intercepted. Now, I also have an intercepted Sun in my 7th house. And I know that whether it was me or my environment, or probably a combination of both, I really wasn't encouraged or didn't really feel encouraged to really express myself and be myself. Everybody else was bigger than me. These massive, huge personalities. And I was like, okay, I'll just be quiet. Even though I don't necessarily have a tremendously small personality, it's just everybody else's personality was bigger, much bigger.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a sense of that it feels like it takes longer to manifest things that are intercepted. But on the other side, they're more introverted because they don't have an immediate external outlet. So we go inside and we develop ourselves internally much, much more than we would if we didn't have the interception. So there's a lot more self-knowledge that comes from planets that are intercepted. And signs being intercepted.
Might be more inward in those, like those houses, like because you're intercepted there, or
Yeah. It can affect that house for sure. You do a lot more analyzing around that house.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just wondering because the fourth house was pretty like intense for me. So.
Oh, I know. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so
the other thing about.
Yeah, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
Oh, the other thing about when we have interceptions is that means the house is very big. Because your 10th house and your 4th house are they're much bigger than 30 degrees. They're much bigger than a sign. So that means anytime planets move through your 10th house or your 4th house, they take longer to move through those houses.
Yeah.
And so that means in this lifetime, you want to do more work on those areas of your life. You're going to spend more time working on those areas of your life. So we have an element of a bit of a late bloomer when we have planets intercepted also, because there hasn't been as much encouragement to express yourself when you were younger as far as those planets, if there are any intercepted planets. Sometimes they're just intercepted signs, and that doesn't seem to have as much of an effect on a person. But if there are intercepted planets, we haven't had the same kind of early encouragement, and we've had to go internally more. We're much more introverted. We're learning on the inside much, much more. So in the long run, when we do bloom, we bloom so much more. You've got so much more. You've tried so much harder to get it into manifestation, so that when you do, it's like boom, it's big. But I mean, as an example of an intercepted sun for me, because my son's in the 7th house and it's about relationships, my first 6 years of life were as an only child living in the African countryside. And so when I was 3, my best friend was 12, and I got to see him once every 2 weeks. So it's pretty isolated. And here's a sun in the 7th house, relationship-oriented person. Wandering around, doing a lot of mystical stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I certainly had a pretty bad example of partnership in terms of my parents, who basically were always in a Cold War, slept on separate floors. That was, again, not a very good encouragement or a model of what my soul heart's desire is, which is that partnership experience that's deep and full. But once again, it sure makes you ask questions, and it pushes you into yourself. So you learn tremendous amount about that area of life. And then when it's time to manifest, it does in a big way.
That's interesting. So the 10th house. So it's Taurus. So I'd be looking for the planet for Taurus, right?
Yep.
Which is Earth.
Yeah. Earth. Well, Earth. That was Earth is the planet Earth is.
Okay. It's Venus.
It's Venus. Yes.
Yeah. So Venus is, where is Venus in here? Oh, it's in my 5th house.
Yeah.
So my 5th house is my lovers, my children, my self-expression, my sense of power, my self-love. And it's interesting you said that, we're spending more time in my 10th house.
Yeah.
Because when I looked at 10th house while you were talking, it's the outcomes of my efforts really spoke to me.
Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like there's a lot of buildup for things right now. And I just feel like with this, if I'm interpreting it right, but my 5th house is kind of, my lovers. So I really kind of see how, kind of not the outcome, but kind of like the opportunity to spend more time, because there's a lot of lead up to kind of what that looks like. And also self-love has been huge for me as well. and the career foundation. But the career foundation to me is very tied to myself, like who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be interesting to kind of see what that looks like. But I think that there'll be a lot once I figure that out, which is what I'm going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an idea of kind of what it will look like, but not exactly, right? So I think that's interesting that you mentioned the 10th house would be a little bit more time to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, it's true. Now it's interesting with Saturn transiting your 5th house right now. It's the houses that have a planet ruling them from the 5th house are activated to a certain degree. So even though 5th house is about lovers and self-expression, creativity, your own deeper self-love, because of the planet in the 5th that rules your 10th house of career and your 2nd house of money, and because the 5th house is also about an expansion, as Saturn transits it, it's about an expansion of our power of expression in life. It's really helping very steadily and profoundly and internally, but in other words, through a lot of introverted work, but you're also doing extroverted self-expression. It's helping to grow these areas of your life, your 10th house and your 2nd house.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one was a little bit easier for me.
Right. Some of them are. Some of them are like, oh, yeah, that's easy to figure out what that means. But it's kind of a nice configuration because, first of all, 2nd house and 10th house are houses that are related to each other anyway. Our career and our finances are usually pretty connected. So they're both ruled by Venus, so that's nice and harmonious. And it's a 5th house, so it's expressive. You gain power and confidence through that house. So that says nice things about those areas of your life, really. Yeah,
I'm probably the most confident I've ever been, but it's still a work in progress. But moving into my 5th house, I definitely felt that.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. Okay. Do you want to do another one before we?
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if we might be able to finish the host derivations. I don't mind going a bit over time.
Yeah, it's Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And Cancer is the moon.
Yeah.
And the moon is, where is the moon? It's because they're all compiled into, it's in my 4th house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Cancer. So I'm looking at the 4th house. Is my home, my childhood, my opposite sex parent, my long-term career foundation, and my sense of security. And then I look at the moon, right?
And then you look at the sign the moon's in.
The sign the moon's in. The sign the moon's in. So is it Scorpio?
That's right. And what facet of the 11th house are we wanting to look at right now?
What facet? Oh yeah. Probably my dreams and my ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm looking at Scorpio, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Moon and Scorpio in the 4th. So how does Moon and Scorpio in the 4th house inform your ideals?
Okay, so Scorpio is intensely, defensively, purposely, with desire, sexually in control, working beneath the surfaces and from the core. So, okay, help me here. I think I do the desire. I always like the sexually. Yeah, just my hopes for the future. I really just see this as having desire, living with purpose. This is all kind of that lead up again, right? Of just really coming together. Because it's really important to me, and I know everyone's different, but for me, I need to feel into my purpose and have joy in what I do. And I'm just not quite fully there yet. That's why I'm obviously doing this, because this is the one thing I probably have never had to question if it was right for me. I just knew it was. But I've kind of, been trying a bunch of different things over the years. So, being able to find my purpose and living with that,
Yes.
desire. And yeah, so that's
Well,
how
yeah. The moon can be kind of fluctuating.
Yeah.
So I can understand the trying various things, and if you have to feel your way towards what your desires and your goals and ideals are, because it's your 11th house is very lunar. It's emotions. It's not going to be the brain. The mind is not going to be able to figure that one out. Only your feelings.
It's your emotional nature and your past life patterns.
Yeah. Moon is to do with past life patterns to a degree, for sure, and with habits and early childhood experiences, and even the moon has to do with the emotions we absorbed from our mother when we were very, very small, when we're a baby, and we don't really know the difference between she and ourselves.
So is it just a coincidence that my mom is a Cancer, or?
Probably not.
Just curious. So how do you interpret this for me?
Well, I'm starting to say, like, you have to feel your way to what means something to you. What are your dreams?
Yeah.
Your dreams are going to have to move you deeply.
Yeah, that's true. I get it.
For it to be a real goal, it's got to be meaningful. It's got to achieve something. It's got to be something you feel deeply for, and that you can really be at home with. It's going to be in the core of your being. Your moon is sitting so right at the very, very beginning of your 4th house. And that is such a pivotal point in a person's chart, because it's right at the very core of our being. So that's our most deepest, most natural self, almost in a very private way within us. Is what anytime a planet's sitting on the 4th, we pretty much live from it.
Okay. And then the 12th, what is that symbol? What is that?
See it as a lion's mane, or the lion's curling.
Oh, it looks different than because there's different versions of it. So it's the Leah. Yeah. Okay. I'm used to seeing that kind of that curl. Like it's, okay. That makes sense.
And again, this one is a bit more stylized. So
yeah. Okay.
It's like trying to read people's handwriting, right? Some of these different astrological.
Yeah, you have to get used to it.
Yeah.
It's the sun.
Yeah.
So again, is in my 4th house.
Yes.
So it's going to be Taurus. And again, 4th house is
not Taurus.
Oh no, not Taurus. Leo. Just said that. I know. My home, my childhood, my opposite sex parent, my long-term career foundation, and my sense of security. And Leo is
or Sagittarius. See, Leo is the ruler of your 12th, but we're looking at it being influenced in a Sagittarian way from the 4th house, sun in the 4th.
Right. So I'm looking at Sagittarius then.
Yeah.
So I like the word exploring. So how would you interpret this?
Well, what part of the 12th house are we looking at? Because each house rules several different things.
What part of the 12th house are we looking at? It's interesting. It says letting go and endings. My subjective spiritual leanings, the things I stored. I like all of these. So, I mean, because it's the 12th house, maybe letting go and endings. And then I'd look at Sagittarius.
Yeah. Now, one thing I'll just say is that any house ruled by Leo is going to have a strong connection to your soul, because it's ruled by the sun. So you would say you read out all the 12th house stuff, and you said, I like all of these. Well, that's of course you do, because you've got your sun rules your 12th house. So it's part of your soul.
Because they're all, okay. That's interesting.
So one thing that I think of right away with the Sagittarius ruling your 12th house is that Sagittarius is your soul, and Sagittarius is the truth seeker. So you would easily make endings, and you would be able to clear your life very easily for the most part, because you would know what's really matters to you and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, it's hard to put into words, but it's like, my soul wants to be true and free, and I want to be in harmony with my soul. My soul only has certain needs that really matter to it, and the rest is easy to let go of.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm kind of training myself to do that right now. Right now, I'm kind of doing it with my relationships, like a little bit more.
Good.
There's other things like my jobs and things like that. As I'm learning more to do more things, I have joy. Like that's kind of where I'm leaning. I have kind of a plan for that. So
yeah,
it's that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And then, of course, your sun being in the fourth, the things that are important to you have to do with fourth house matters. So those are the things you're going to still hold on to. But even so, you'll still clean house, no pun intended,
Yeah.
to make sure that you're re-perfecting your perspective on what your goals are,
Mm-hmm.
making sure it's clean, making sure it makes sense. It would just help you keep everything clean as far as your soul purpose goes, because the most important soul purpose is where the sun is.
Yeah, I really see that 12th house is kind of optimized. Like
It is. And most people at Virgo rising have Leo on their 12th house. So most people with Virgo rising being a sign that has to do with purity and purifying things, that Leo 12th house really helps you do that, because you'll cleanse your life in accordance with what your real soul purpose is.
Yeah, I like that.
It's very nice.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I knew someone with a very late Virgo rising, and the 12th house was also ruled by Virgo, and there was more intellectual trying to clear things out, and it didn't work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a feeler.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That will help you a lot with astrology.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And again, I like that Mercury Moon conjunction. It's such a good aspect for an astrologer, because it's the right brain, left brain are already connected. So it's great.
Yeah, I like that.